when you open the door for somebody else.
Welcome back, everybody, to the vaccine conversation. We're glad you've joined us. How's it going, Melissa?
It's going.
Okay.
It's going,
Yeah.
Dr. Bob.
All right,
This
cool.
is the vaccine conversation with Melissa and Dr. Bob. In case you guys haven't tuned in before, make sure to check out some of our other episodes that we've done. We've covered so many different topics on this, and we'll continue to do so. We have our website you can check out as well, immunityeducationgroup.org, and our Facebook page, Immunity Education Group, where we will list the podcasts, and there'll be places there for you to add comments and discussion on what we're talking about.
Yeah, and don't forget to rate our podcast. That helps us either increase or decrease in the rankings. I guess it depends on how you rate us. But all right, you guys. Well, we've had some fantastic topics lately, and I think we're going back to boring disease information again now.
So just so people know, we're going to do a series that basically covers all of the infectious diseases that are on the vaccine schedule. And so we're going to do one particular disease per episode.
Right.
We'll talk about the disease, disease information, symptoms of the disease, risks of the disease, and then we'll also talk about the vaccine and the efficacy of that particular vaccine and potential risks with that vaccine. And so that way you can have a good summary of each of these infectious diseases. Again, we're only covering the ones that are on the childhood vaccination schedule.
Right. And we did a disease overview recently where we kind of covered all the diseases that we vaccinate against for babies.
That's podcast number 9 for your reference.
And so this podcast is actually going to be a focus on one single disease, pertussis or whooping cough, and the whooping cough vaccine. Right, as you just said. And so some of what we're going to say is going to be a repeat of what you might have heard in the overview, but we're really going to dig down deep and get into a lot more detail about the disease and the vaccine, just so, again, you can be educated about this particular vaccine decision.
And we'll title this in a way so that you know this is part of the series, the individual disease and all about that particular disease. This is going to be pertussis, the disease and the vaccine, or something like that.
Right.
So that you'll know. So that then on another one, you'll be able to tell just by titles.
They're already listening to this, and they kind of already know.
No, but I'm saying if they're listening to the list, if they're looking at the list, that way they can know which ones are going to be just covering that individual one.
In the future,
because you'll see one that says tetanus, the disease and the vaccine. So you'll be able to easily find if you're looking for specific information on one disease. That's how we're going to be setting it up, and you'll be able to tell by the title because you're not going to have to listen through all of them just to find that information you were looking for. In case you have a family member or a friend that has specific information that they're looking for on pertussis, then you would come to this episode, pertussis, the disease and the vaccine.
Excellent. Yeah. Good point. Okay, so
just a little housekeeping information.
Yes. Well, let's jump in and I don't know. We'll see if we can make some, just make it more interesting than just a little medical lecture on disease and vaccines. So I guess I want to maybe just give a little disclaimer, and simply in that we're going to give you disease information and vaccine information, and we are not telling you what to do. Again, it's very important. I guess maybe when we're giving these kinds of episodes, that it's very important you discuss this with your doctor, you discuss this with your friends, with your family. Talk about it with anyone you want, but you really do need, I think, to formulate your decisions and your understanding, and then run it by a healthcare practitioner.
Yeah, I mean, we've never, any of these episodes are not trying to shape anybody's belief systems, because the whole point and the awesome thing I think about what we're doing is we're just trying to give you more information to your pile so that you can take all of that information and formulate with your family and your health practitioner, whoever you trust, that you can look at that as a big picture and you have a little more to make a full decision. I mean, I know that many of us didn't have all of the information. It was very one-sided. So the whole idea is give you a little more to think about, a little more to put into the bowl there, and then you can kind of decide what sits with you and what doesn't and what feels right for your family.
Okay, so whooping cough or pertussis. Basically, I guess I just want to give you a quick overview of what that disease risk is like today, because I think that if you're a new parent, especially, you're sitting there, you want to know, will my baby catch whooping cough? What will happen if my baby catches whooping cough? How common is it? How fatal is it? So we're going to really give you kind of an in-depth overview. So basically, Whooping cough tends to go in cycles every 3 or 4 years or so. We have every 3 or 4 years, we have a huge upsurge of whooping cough, way more cases than we usually do. And then it kind of, dies down a little bit, and then we have fewer cases for several years. And so I think we had a peak in 2010. We had a peak in 2014. I don't think we had a peak since 2014. I don't think we've had a peak this year in 2018 yet, but it goes in waves. And when we're on a high year where there's many people catching whooping cough, I mean you could be looking at 100,000 cases nationwide. It could be 150,000 cases nationwide. On a really low year, you might be looking at maybe 5 or 10,000 cases in a really low year.
Yeah,
so there's
big difference.
A huge variability. But I think out of all the diseases we vaccinate against, this is by far one of the most common. Other than the flu and maybe other than rotavirus, 2 diseases that everyone catches at least once. Whooping cough might be maybe even more common than chickenpox now, possibly.
You're saying is maybe the third most likely.
Yeah, third most likely to
catch.
happen.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So as a parent, I think you have to understand the reality. It's a very good chance that your child will catch whooping cough. And I think what you don't want is you don't want your child to catch whooping cough as a young baby, because that's when it's most fatal.
And by young, you mean before 3 months?
Yeah, in the first 3 to 4 months of life. So because when we look at the average of about 10 fatalities from whooping cough every year, about 10, each of those fatalities is very tragic. All of those fatalities are in babies who are 3 months and younger. It's all those newborns, because their respiratory system is just more susceptible to whooping cough. And so for older kids, it's not a fatal disease. Yeah, I know the media will try to spread a lot of fear and blame about whooping cough going around schools and infecting children left and right. For children, it actually is it's a manageable disease. It's a bad cough, but it's certainly not fatal or dangerous to the kids. It's really only fatal to the young babies. So what does it look like? What is a typical case? Basically, it starts off like a cold, runny nose, cough. You don't even know you have whooping cough when it starts. And it's contagious just like any other colds. It's caused by a bacteria. And the bacteria basically plant themselves in your airway and start replicating and make you have a normal cold and cough. After about a week, the pertussis germs, they secrete a toxin. It's literally like a chemical irritant that they're secreting in your airway. And this chemical irritant then makes your airway start to swell and get extremely irritated and very inflamed. And that's when you start having this very severe cough, about a week or so into the course of the illness. And that's when you start to realize it's whooping cough. You get the really hallmark coughing fits, or it's basically, want me to do it? I can do it for you if you want. But no, I won't. I'll spare you. It's basically a real severe cough. You have like 5 or 10 or 15 coughs. You run out of air. You can't cough anymore. And then you're like, and then cough. You run out of air. Your face turns red. And then you're like, cough again. You're talking, 20, 30 seconds, maybe even a minute of coughing. You can't stop. And then eventually you'll go, and you'll recover, and and then you won't cough again. You'll kind of catch your breath. You might gag, you might throw up. And then you recover, you catch your breath, and then you're good. All right. That's really the hallmark of what makes whooping cough obvious.
And this is something that has to be confirmed, usually through testing, right? To confirm that
right.
it is
Well, so
pertussis.
then you go to the doctor, okay, and you say, my kid has a really bad cough. I want to just talk real quick. Is every case of whooping cough that I've seen in my office, it's 100% obvious to me. Mm-hmm. Like I know, I watch them cough, and I'm like, oh my gosh, that's the video that's in the textbook online in the whooping cough chapter. Mm-hmm. Every single parent, no, not every single, probably 90% of parents that bring that child into me had no idea it was whooping cough. Like I don't think many parents understand what whooping cough looks like.
Even though there are so many cases.
Even though there's so many cases, and that's probably the one thing they're worried about. They're like, oh, I don't want my kid to have whooping cough.
But have no idea what it looks like.
They have no idea what it looks like. And I want to ask you what your perspective on this, because I almost feel like they're not medically trained to know what it looks like. But it's so obvious. Like what I just did for you seems like so obviously whooping cough. I almost feel like there's a denial in parents in that they don't want their kid to have caught whooping cough. So they're kind of like going to think, okay, well, it can't be whooping cough. It's got to be something else. They don't want it to be. So I'll come to the doctor. The doctor will figure out. They convince themselves it's not.
Well, I think another problem probably comes down to the fact that you're not being educated by your doctors. Like you're not having your pediatrician tell you, by the way, whooping cough is something your child might catch. This is what it looks like. If this, so that you just even a quick 2-minute overview to say this might happen in their childhood at one point. I want you to kind of know what it looks like so that way you can let me know immediately and we can get, started on treatment right away. It's how would we know what it looks like?
But do you think that denialism is possible?
Well, so what I'm thinking is because you don't know because your doctor's assuming you're just going to get vaccinated for it, and therefore you're not going to get it. In theory. And so he doesn't need to educate you on that. And so because it's looked at something that has that negative stigma, of course you're going to think to yourself like, oh my God, I don't want to be one of those. I wouldn't want my kid to be one of those because somehow you think that you're going to be a target for something negative because people don't understand how many people are vaccinated that get whooping cough and how 90% of that California outbreak in 2014 were vaccinated children, at least one dose, but many with 2 and 3, doses. I think because people don't understand that, they're afraid that, yes, if your child has opted out of that vaccine and you were to have whooping cough, then you are, going to be the bad guy now. And so maybe that there is that subconscious need to kind of go, no, it's not that. But you know what? I was never explained what it would look like either. Right. And as many people that I know that have seen it and treated it well and their children are fine, I wouldn't know the details, and I kind of put that on pediatricians that it's if it's the third most likely to be caught in your kid's childhood, then it seems like you would want to know what symptoms are for that so that you can know how to move forward and how to proceed. And then people wouldn't wait too long to come in because they wouldn't think it's just a regular cough. Right. I think that's an important thing that we need to be taught some of these things to look out to protect our own kids. Because obviously once you've had one kid with it, then you would know for your other children that you have. But if you've never had a child with it, then you would need to know that. And then maybe you'd come in and say, hey, this sounds like pertussis to me, Dr. Bob. And there wouldn't be a negative stigma. But it's not talked about at all. Right. And so anything not talked about tends to become a negative thing, right? Okay. Yeah. No, that's definitely fair. Spoken like a true mom.
Right, but I guess I'll just speak personally. As a doctor, admitted, and I don't mean to say that, but I had to say it because I'm a doctor. Is that I'll just tell you. I mean, you told me the parent perspective. I'm honestly annoyed when parents come in with what I see as completely obviously whooping cough. And the parent's been at home for a week with this child, or their child's been in school for a week with this child.
Because they just thought it was a lingering cough.
Right. And nothing else looks like whooping cough. When you have whooping cough, it's completely obvious because there's no other cough like it. So, but no, I get what you're saying. I mean, I can't put my own, personal...
I mean, if you're just told one time, and then you had that in your little arsenal of knowledge that when that happened, you're like, oh my gosh, this is that. Let me take my kid out of, I mean,
so maybe that's on me. Maybe I, can do a better job at educating
I think all doctors can because... Again, if we're not seeing these diseases or don't remember them from our own childhood and know the symptoms, like a rash, for example, there's so many things a rash could be that it's not like you're going to go, oh, that's definitely chickenpox, or that's definitely measles, or that's definitely, there are so many things it could be. You don't often know until time
not
goes.
For whooping cough.
But
there's only one thing it can be
again,
when you see it.
It's not like our doctor goes, okay, here are the 5 most likely things your child's going to catch over the next 10 years. I just want you to know what to look like. You need to come right to me right away. I think,
and that is a responsibility. Well, but let's actually say, let's not single out that's a responsibility for the vaccinated family or it's not a responsibility just for the unvaccinated family.
No, I don't mean that.
I know. And everybody has the same responsibility to recognize whooping cough, know it when they see it, know what it sounds like, so that you don't send your kids to school and you get medical intervention as soon as you can. Because whooping cough is one of the vaccines that doesn't keep you from getting the disease. It doesn't stop you from getting the germ and making you feel sick.
So I don't think people really get that.
People don't know that.
You get the vaccine, you think my kid's never going to get pertussis because I got the vaccine. But what you're saying
that might be true for some vaccines, but it's definitely not true for pertussis.
Which means that you get the vaccine, your child can still absolutely get it and spread it.
Right. And I'll say right now, how do we know that's true? We know that's true from a 2014 study that two scientists did. One of the scientists works for the FDA. He's an FDA scientist. And they actually studied a big population of baboons. And they gave some of those baboons the DTaP vaccine. They gave some of the baboons the older version of the vaccine that works better, the whole cell pertussis. And then they didn't vaccinate some of the baboons. And then they introduced pertussis into the population. And they let pertussis whooping cough spread around all those baboons.
Can you say primate instead of baboon?
Primate. Primate.
That's so ridiculous.
Yeah. Well, actually, they officially call them non-human primates.
Okay, I like that much.
Yeah, that's the study. It's like a pertussis efficacy in non-human primates.
I can't keep a straight face anymore if you keep saying baboon.
So you can look at this study out. Maybe
non-human primates.
Yeah,
it's
an FDA study from 2014, and again, what they found is those who got, they found that everyone caught the disease, first of all. Or there are no difference in rates of the disease, whether or not you had the old vaccine or the current vaccine we use, or you were not vaccinated. The rates of people catching the disease were the same.
That's important, I think, to recognize because the vaccine's not keeping you from catching it, is what you're saying.
So the people that got our current whooping cough vaccine actually held on to the germs longer in their system. They stayed infectious longer, and they were contagious to others longer. Those who got the old vaccine that we don't use anymore, that works better, they cleared the germs quicker. Those who didn't get vaccinated and caught their germ naturally, the infection naturally, they cleared it quicker, and they only caught it once. The unvaccinated non-human primates caught the disease once, so they're contagious once, so they spread it to their neighbors once, and then they don't catch it again. The primates that got the DTaP vaccine, the one we currently use, they kept getting reinfected. They didn't develop any useful ongoing immunity. They were infected more than once. They were contagious to everyone else around them every time. Yeah. Right. And so this study showed that all the vaccine does for people is it makes you feel less sick when you catch the germs. Your cough is not as severe, but it does nothing to prevent the spread, and it's only an individual benefit, so there's no public health benefit to doing it.
And it also doesn't prevent you from catching it.
Right.
It's like so in the future, it's not preventing you from not getting re-exposed either.
Right. So they basically said one of the main reasons why we still have this huge problem with whooping cough is the vaccine doesn't prevent it from spreading, but it might actually make it spread more because more people are contagious. You're not as sick, so you're not staying home from school.
Right.
You're sending your kid to school because all he has is a regular cough, not a whooping cough-like cough.
But he's really spreading pertussis bacteria.
Right. So this is one vaccine where there's no public health benefit, so you can't argue it should be mandatory for the public good. There's no herd immunity issues here. There's only an individual. And I think that's important to know about, to understand about this vaccine.
Well, it is when the narrative is that everybody needs to get vaccinated for school entry. It's mandated because you're trying to prevent these fatal diseases from spreading in school, and it's your community responsibility to do so. Right. And then you find out that this particular vaccine that is for a disease that actually is serious and can be fatal, but like you said before, only in infants, that you getting the vaccine is doing nothing for public health. It's actually not preventing the spread of it. It's not preventing, it's not reducing the risk of the incidence of that disease either. And so it's the opposite of what the, legislators for mandatory vaccines would have you believe. Right. And so that's important for people to know the real information as it relates to this disease.
Right. And I think that's one thing you could argue, again, if you were in the process of trying to fight against a mandatory vaccine law in your own state, you need to make the legislators understand that, vaccines might be great and they might help you feel less sick, but this is one example of a vaccine as well as the tetanus diphtheria parts of the same vaccine, it does not have any public health benefit in preventing the spread. So you need to have your legislator ask the legislator who's writing this law and trying to get it passed, why are you trying to pass a mandatory vaccine that doesn't matter in this perspective?
It's not a public health. Yeah, right. It doesn't benefit public health. Yeah, I mean, I definitely think a lot of people don't know this information.
Right. I'm trying to find that FDA study, but maybe I'll.
Well, also, if you're looking for that, like I just happen to find my national vital statistics, just to go based on what you were saying earlier. As of the end of 2017, the data for that year, the most up-to-date data for the National Vital Statistic Report says that there were 6 deaths from whooping cough under 1 year, and 1 in an elderly person. So there were 0 from 1 to 4 years old, 0 from 5 to 14 years old, 0 from 15 to 24 years.
Right.
So not a single death from 1 year old on, and the handful of the 6, I'm guessing, were the 3 months and under. Were only 6. I mean, 6 child deaths of a disease that spreads so rapidly, they have so many cases for. When you really think about the percentages, your percentage of fatality for this is extremely low.
Right, it's extremely low. But let me. I said this in the earlier podcast. That target age group where pertussis is the most serious, the young babies. They actually have looked at these data in the past. They've come up with a number of that the fatality risk for the youngest babies, those newborns, might be as high as 1 in 200. Where when newborns get this disease, it can be a lot more serious. It might be as high as 1 in 200. I've seen a number of young babies catch this disease, and then they've all were treated, and they all were cared for, and they all did okay. I haven't had anybody die of this disease.
Are you going to talk about treatment?
Right. So treatment. So basically, you get to your doctor's office. The doctor realizes it's whooping cough
with your very obvious cough, and he's annoyed. Okay.
But here's a few more clues that can clue you into whooping cough. After you're done with the cold and the regular cough, once you start the whooping cough fits, you no longer actually look sick. You actually look 100% well when you're not in a coughing fit. You might actually have a coughing fit maybe every hour or two, or you might go 3 or 4 hours with no cough. You no longer have a runny nose. You don't even look sick. You don't feel sick. You feel completely fine. And that's why I think a lot of parents don't realize that the kid looks totally fine unless you're witnessing the 1 minute long severe coughing fit. So that's a clue to whooping cough. Your kid goes through a normal cold, then they get the worst cough of their life, but they look completely healthy otherwise. And that's what clues me into it as well. So then you hopefully eventually get to your doctor. The best and most accurate way to diagnose whooping cough is actually to witness a cough, for the doctor to witness the cough. And if your kid could go hours without coughing, then get it on video. I always love it when parents bring in the video of what the kid was doing last night, because by the time you're in my office, you're not coughing anymore. So please, bring a video, show your doctor. I saw a kid just a couple of weeks ago with whooping cough. They had been to a doctor a week earlier, and with the same thing, and no one in that visit was clued in that it might be whooping cough. And then I saw them, and it totally was, because the parents didn't think to bring a video or show the evidence of it. So anyway, what else the doctor can do is the doctor can do a nasal swab to test for whooping cough. The problem with that test is it's not very accurate. It can miss about half. It can miss about half the cases of whooping cough, and it's only accurate during the phase of the cough where you have the runny nose before you've started the severe coughs. So if you see someone with a normal cold and a normal cough, you can test them for whooping cough, and it's more accurate at that point. And maybe if you
you wouldn't know at that point because
you wouldn't know to test because it's just a regular cough. But now, if you get them in the first maybe 2 or 3 days of the severe cough, the test may catch it. It might be worth doing the test. However, the test takes a few days to get back. It might only pick up about half the number of cases. So really the bottom line is the best way to diagnose it is to witness the fit, and someone who knows what a fit looks like to witness it. So then if a doctor decides you have whooping cough, you can treat with antibiotics. Azithromycin is the antibiotic of choice. It's only going to help you if you've if you start treating it in the first several days of the severe cough. You come into my office with a huge whooping cough fits for 7 or 10 days, the antibiotics aren't going to help. So it is important to get in early. You treat it. You're contagious. You're considered contagious until you're done with the 5 days of antibiotics. All right, so you stay home for those 5 days. You get treated. The antibiotics are probably going to help reduce the severity of the cough if you caught it early. Mm-hmm. Let's say you're in my office at 7 to 10 days or 2 weeks later of the severe cough. The antibiotics are not going to help. They're not. You're going to then be stuck with that severe cough for several weeks, possibly. Some kids will have the severe cough for 3 months. Ugh. The Chinese call it the 90-day cough, for their word for it. So yeah, if I see you that late, I probably might not even give you antibiotics because I know it's not going to reduce the cough. Now, the contagious period for whooping cough and how this plays into the antibiotic decision is that you're considered contagious from when you first developed like the runny nose and a somewhat significant cough. Not necessarily the severe cough, but when the runny nose and a kind of a regular cough started. From that point until 3 weeks later is the contagious period. So whooping cough has a very long contagious period. It's got one of the longest contagious periods of all these diseases.
You're saying from then until
3 weeks. So 3 weeks of when the runny nose and the cough starts, you're contagious. So these kids are spreading it.
Yeah, most people are not keeping their kids home.
I know, you're not at home.
Weeks, yeah.
Right, you're not keeping it home. So if I see you early in that and you want to take your 5 days of antibiotics, then you get over that contagious period more quickly. But if I see a kid who's been coughing for 2.5, 3 weeks already, I'm not going to treat them with antibiotics because they're already at the end of their contagious period. You can actually return to school once you have completed that 3 weeks of coughing or completed the 5 days of antibiotics.
So even if the coughing continues.
Yeah, so you'll keep coughing, you'll be in school, but you're not going to be contagious anymore. And what's also kind of a challenge and what's interesting for me as a doctor is I'm mandated by law to report every case of whooping cough to the public health department. And a lot of parents are really scared by that. But in all my experiences, I've reported all these cases to the public health department. The public health department has never treated anybody poorly or with discrimination. They're just doing their job. They call you up. They don't come to your house. They don't take your kids away. They don't really do anything to you. They call you. They make sure your kid is either at home for the 3 weeks of contagiousness or is taking antibiotics. They want to make sure everyone around that child is taking antibiotics or at least has been offered antibiotics. And then they're done. And they just want to make sure that it's spreading less. I guess another little thing to add to that is everyone around the sick child can take antibiotics before you develop symptoms. Or even if you've already developed symptoms, but you don't know it's whooping cough in yourself, you can take antibiotics so you never even get into the severe fits. You treat it early, and you're not gonna feel that sick. So that's kind of the process of I think going through the disease. If you're
whooping cough is one of the things that antibiotics make sense for. Like it's one of those things that. For many
if you treat it early on, yes.
Yeah, for many that avoid antibiotics or try to avoid them as much as possible, that this is one of the ones that, if you're treating early, is worth it. Right. It's worth getting on.
Right. Again, now there are some natural treatments for whooping cough. If you look online for a high dose vitamin C protocol for treating whooping cough, again, you're not treating like an antibiotic would. The vitamin C really reduces a lot of the inflammation and the irritation from whooping cough, so it can make your cough much less severe.
As far as the coughing fits?
Right, the coughing fits. It's not going to make you not contagious. Excuse me. Sorry. But it's going to make the cough, it may make the cough much less severe. And a lot of my patients have
What about duration of how long that cough would go?
It might make it less. Yeah, so if your doctor uses all natural remedies, ask your doctor about vitamin C.
Let's say hypothetically,
as well as antibiotics.
Yeah, let's say you're doing both of those things. Would it still be a 90-day cough, or is there?
No. So if you catch it early, it's not going to be the 90-day cough. But if you're in my office with 2 weeks of severe fits, you might be stuck with a 90-day cough because the antibiotic is not going to change that. But the vitamin C might change it.
But by taking the antibiotics, you're looking at still another week or two versus versus the additional 2 months, or how long?
No, I guess let me be clear. I think if you get on the antibiotic within the first several days of severe cough, you probably then won't be one of the 90-day coughing kids.
Right, but how long does it go is what I'm saying.
It varies. It might be 3 or 4 more days. It might be 5, 7 days. Yeah.
Well, you said this is the third most likely thing that my child might catch, so I want to take
wanna
notes.
know. No,
I'm taking notes here, like a smart parent who is listening and paying attention, so that I can recognize signs and symptoms. I haven't dealt with this with either of my 2 healthy children, but in the case that they might be exposed to it and this happen, I want to be aware of all the things too.
I think that was as close as we're going to get to Melissa admitting that she's fascinated by my talk on something medical.
Taking notes and fascinated mean 2 different things altogether. Okay. But no, I do find it interesting to find out what a disease looks like is important, because there is a lot of fear about a disease often when you're unfamiliar with them. And you're unfamiliar with pertussis because you haven't seen it around. So you're that as a parent, it's always nerve-wracking when you haven't seen a disease and they're exposed to it, and that they're the media portrays it as something risky. You want to be familiar with what it looks like, what symptoms your child might have, and most importantly, how to treat it and treat it effectively, so that your child is able to recover and move forward with their immunity.
Okay, so I think, I guess I should just touch on young babies with whooping cough. Again, they, if they're coughing so severely and it's hard for them to get in air, and that's where the risk is, that's where the dangerous cases are in the babies 3 or 4 months and younger, they can actually turn blue. They can cough so hard they can't get enough oxygen to actually turn blue. And that's where these babies then would be hospitalized. So they can be given oxygen, they can be supported through their coughing fits, and that's where the real danger is for the babies. And again, in the young babies I've seen over all these 20 years, I've not had a baby harmed that way by whooping cough. I think I might have put one in the hospital for observation, but it can be really bad. And then that's what I think you'll see that the worst case scenarios is a baby turning blue, they're really low on oxygen, and they're very sick from it, and then they have to be supported in the hospital. And again, we have an average of about 10 babies dying of whooping cough in our country every year. So
last year 6,
yeah. So so let's talk about the vaccine. I think that's the disease. You're as a parent, you need to understand the disease. So let's talk about the whooping cough vaccine. I guess the vaccine options basically start while you're pregnant. In your 3rd trimester of pregnancy, now every woman is offered a whooping cough vaccine. It's actually the whooping cough tetanus diphtheria vaccine, the DTaP vaccine. You're given the dose during pregnancy so that your baby is born with some antibodies, so that you then don't, the baby, hopefully it'll reduce the baby's risk of catching whooping cough. They've only done 1 study so far on that, and it shows it reduces a newborn's chance of getting whooping cough by about 50%. It reduces that chance that they're going to catch whooping cough by about half, but it doesn't work. It doesn't work, better than that. But
I will say, out of all
does give some immunity.
But out of the thousands and thousands of cases of whooping cough that we see nationally, if it's so fatal, with newborns, the fact that you're only having 6 to 10 deaths really highlights how few newborns are catching it.
Right.
Which is interesting.
You're right. There's probably a very low number of newborns that actually catch it.
Because if only 6 are dying last year, and this is something that is really risky with no protection, potentially no protection, and these are the most vulnerable population, for some reason, newborns are able to keep away from pertussis, and it tends to be...
Right, because I think everyone around them tends to be more careful. If you're sick, you don't come over.
Yeah. And if you're breastfed, you're offered some type of immune protection on some level, and
right.
So you would hope that would carry you through those 3 months to get you to a place where you are not as much at risk.
Right. So then the vaccine is offered at 2 months, 4 months, 6 months, so that newborn baby then starts getting some antibody generation from their own vaccines at 2 months and at 4 months. But the vaccine doesn't work very well until you've had that 2nd or 3rd dose. So by the time you've had all 3 of the first doses by 6 months, you're actually out of the danger age for whooping cough anyway. So you're and I wish we could figure out a good way to get babies protected earlier, because that's when the disease is dangerous. And so I guess when I'm talking to parents in the office and they have a 5 or 6 month old baby and they haven't given them any vaccines yet, but they're thinking about whooping cough vaccine, I sort of share all this information, and they think to themselves, well, if my 6 month old or my 9 month old or my 12 month old baby caught whooping cough, it's no longer that severe deadly disease that it might have been a few months ago. And a lot of parents, if they don't vaccinate early, they tend to not vaccinate later because they don't see it as a real serious.
Well, so how did this work in the past
later.
then with pregnant women that had already experienced pertussis themselves and had their own immunities, and as being, while they were pregnant, they're passing antibodies, immunities to their child, at least enough to cover those first couple months? I mean, does it seem that it was all sort of set up in a way that we had natural immunities from the mothers that would carry us past the risk zone? And then past the risk zone, it's no longer something that's fatal, and it's something that's manageable. And that now that we are vaccinating everybody all the time, that we're not passing that type of immunity that would cover exactly the most vulnerable point that you're talking about, including pregnancy and then the early months. I mean, is that kind of how it worked before?
Right. Well, what you just said is the exact scenario about how things work for measles and rubella and chickenpox. And we know that based on very good data. I don't know if it's actually true for whooping cough.
You were saying, I wish we could find a way to keep the babies protected younger. And it's like, well, in theory, immunity was set up in such a way that while you were pregnant, you're passing your immunity to your baby to cover those early months when they're at risk. And therefore, after that, they're not at risk anymore, which is kind of the sort of perfect design that eliminates.
Right, I just don't know how to answer it based on studies. Like
I'm curious.
We can answer that with measles and rubella and chickenpox. So we don't really know how reliable long-term immunity is from catching whooping cough or pertussis as a disease. All these women who grow up to have babies, if they caught whooping cough as a child, it's very likely their immunity is worn off, and they won't be giving their newborn baby any useful immunity. Mm-hmm. I mean, maybe if a woman catches whooping cough as a teenager or as a young adult, she might have some immunity left to pass on to the baby, so that the baby has some immunity in the first few months of life. But we just don't know that it's reliable. Like we know women pass immunity for measles, mumps, rubella, and chickenpox. That you can rely on. But if they've caught the natural diseases. Mm-hmm. But we just don't know if we can rely on it for whooping cough. So your idea, in theory, would be great if it worked for whooping cough, but we just don't know if it does. I guess I just want to say real quick, we used to have a vaccine that worked a lot better. It was the whole cell DTaP vaccine. It did do a much better job at reducing whooping cough, and it might have even prevented the spread of whooping cough. But it caused so many severe neurological reactions that they took it off the market. So the vaccine we have now does a less ideal job. And actually, if you can actually do literature searches on the acellular pertussis vaccine, and you'll see a number of articles that talk about how it doesn't do a very good job.
So just so people know, anymore. Acellular versus whole cell. So it used to be DTaP, which is a whole cell bacteria.
That works better.
And then now we have DTaP, which is acellular, taking a smaller component of the bacteria.
Yeah, they just took a bunch of the pertussis components out of the vaccine.
Because it was creating too many side effects.
Yeah, they're creating a lot of bad reactions, but as a trade-off, helping it work better. That's interesting that there's this article recently. It's basically acellular pertussis vaccine trading safety for efficacy. Yeah. Or maybe trading efficacy for safety. It's one of those two. So you can look at
trading safety for efficacy. Okay. That makes sense.
Right. So trading efficacy for safety. Yes, so basically this article published in a very mainstream journal completely admitted we are using a vaccine that doesn't work very well. Right. Because we had to get rid of the unsafe one that was working very well. Can
we talk about how long they tend to last as far as immunity and antibody protection?
Yeah. So these vaccines actually, it's a great point because it's important, and this is why the disease goes around in schools so much. Well, number one, it doesn't give you any good immunity from spreading the germs. But when you get all the infant doses and the toddler booster, then you have some antibody immunity for 2 or 3 years. so that if you catch the germs, you won't have as bad of a case. You get a booster at age 5. That only lasts a couple of years. So there's this interesting susceptibility point from age 7 to age 12 where you're not getting any boosters. So you can have a worse case of the disease and pass it around when you do catch it. Then you get a booster when you're 12. That 12-year-old booster only protects you another couple of years. Right. As far as if you catch the germ, you won't have a severe case.
And that's it.
That's it. And then you're done. Then you spend the rest of your adult life not having that immunity.
Unprotected. Yeah, I think people don't understand that every vaccine has a waning immunity point. For some, it may be 15 years, like measles vaccine is what it was estimated to be, about 15 years or so. And for some, like pertussis, which is the one that people are concerned a lot about because of those infant deaths, a small number of infant deaths, it's 2 to 3 years for an average person, 2 to 3 years of protection, which means all of the adults going around saying, why don't you go get your kids vaccinated? Like themselves, the adults themselves do not have protection from pertussis and are just as likely to get infected and pass and spread something around. And so I think people don't understand pertussis vaccine does not last very long at all. And then I've also read that even in those that get it right away, the efficacy is still in about the 80% tile, which means that even at the time somebody's getting it, there's still about a 20% chance that you are going to be somebody that doesn't respond to that vaccine. So not just the 2 years later, but even in that moment. And so this is both of those things are part of the reason why pertussis is flying around in communities all the time. Yeah, and that goes to my whole point on why it's important to have a healthy immune system so that you can fight these things well.
But it's important to also understand that when you say effective or what it's doing, it's in no way is it even stopping you from catching and spreading the disease.
Right.
Efficacy for the whooping cough vaccine is only defined as how severely you're going to feel and how bad your cough is going to be when you catch the germ. It maybe is 80% effective for some years, maybe
just
2 or 3 years.
That
you're not going to feel as sick, and then it's going to wane quickly. I want to touch on the idea of cocooning really quick, because one thing we started doing several years ago is trying to get everybody who's around a newborn baby to get vaccinated against whooping cough. Grandma, grandpa, mom, dad, all the siblings, everyone is going to, the nanny, everyone is going to come around that baby has to get a whooping cough vaccine. They started promoting the cocooning theory and program without having any data whether it would work. And then after a few years, they realized it's not working because the vaccine doesn't work that way. The vaccine doesn't stop all these grandma, grandpa, nanny, mom, dad. It doesn't stop you from getting sick and then infecting your newborn. It doesn't work that way at all. Have they stopped promoting the cocooning idea? No. They still promote the idea that everyone around that baby, don't you dare let grandma come over until she's had her whooping cough vaccine.
Right.
Don't play with your neighbors unless they've had their whooping cough vaccine. I've had patients not allowed into like a relative's home with a new baby because they don't get the whooping cough vaccine. Because again, the media they promote it as a cocooning effect. You're not going to spread the disease. I almost feel like I should pull up. That Big Bad Wolf commercial about the whooping coff vaccine. Have you seen it?
I'm going
to pull it up. Next time you're talking about something, I'm going to pull it up because I'm going to play it right here on the podcast because I wonder if I can do that. Yeah, it doesn't say the brand name of it. So maybe I'll play it. But anyway, I just want to throw that out there. You're going to get this mindset that the vaccine magically is going to stop everyone from spreading it.
Find it.
No, I know exactly where to find it on YouTube. So anyway, let's go over the risks of the DTaP vaccine. And we've touched on this on other podcasts, but basically the primary risks of the DTaP vaccine is encephalitis reactions are as much as 1 in 1,000.
Oh, I found it.
Good, yeah. So we'll have you play it. The seizure risk is as much as 1 in 14,000, but it might even be higher. If you look at the CDC VIS form, you look at comas, long-term brain injuries. The VIS form even used to warn people about that kids could have unusual behavior changes after this vaccine, and that's considered a serious reaction. I'd say the DTaP vaccine definitely has one of the longer lists of side effects.
Yeah.
A number of neurological side effects I haven't even mentioned.
I believe even on VAERS, it's the second most frequent that's notated for adverse events next to the flu shot.
Okay, right. And that is important. In fact, it might even be good to pull in vaccine-specific VAERS data for these discussions.
That would be a great idea.
Yeah.
Thank you for
if we
that.
only had a doctor around here that knew those kinds of data. But no, I actually have the data that you're asking for. Here it is. So basically, the VAERS data on the whooping cough vaccine, there's two data sets I have. First of all is the number of claims filed in the federal vaccine injury compensation program from the Pertussis vaccine. There have been over 5,000 claims filed for injuries, and including 862 deaths and 4,500 serious injuries filed in vaccine court from this particular DTaP vaccine or the old DTP vaccine.
But you're saying this is vaccine court, not VAERS
Right.
database.
This is vaccine court. Yeah. Now, so then the VAERS database actually in basically these 25 to 28 years that we've been having VAERS reporting from the pertussis containing vaccines, there have been 150,000 serious adverse events reported. Not just regular adverse events, but serious over that 28-year period, which is a lot. Half of these serious vaccine related events were in children under the age of 3. So there's a lot of children, I don't know, 75,000 or more children suffering serious adverse events from this vaccine over the 28 years that we've been collecting VAERS data.
And that's just what's reported because, as we know, people don't always report these types of injuries because a lot of times, again, you go to your pediatrician and if they don't say that there's a connection, then you're not likely to report it, nor are they. So this is a small percentage of probably what has happened over that period of time. Yeah,
and then even more concerning is out of all these serious side effects that have been reported to VAERS, there have been 2,700 deaths from this vaccine reported to VAERS over all these years, and over 90% of those deaths were in kids under 3. And so again, when you're looking at disease risk versus vaccine risk, and we have these VAERS data sets to go on, parents do need to consider the chance that their child is going to suffer a really serious side effect from these vaccines. So I'd say in my office, as I give these vaccines to some patients that decide to opt in for the whooping cough vaccine, I've definitely have seen encephalitis. I've seen babies have these reactions. I've seen some kids I've seen develop other neurological reactions. In fact, there's some pretty good data on tic disorders, kids developing like neurological tic movement disorders from these. And we're talking about
as by teens, they've had 5 doses.
Right. Or 6, actually. 6. Your 12-year-old dose is your sixth.
Okay, 6 doses, but so.
Right. So I think if you look at the risk of disease versus the risk of vaccine, just to throw out the numbers, given how many newborns die from whooping cough every year out of the 4 million that are born, the risk of fatality from whooping cough is about 1 in 400,000. This risk is only for the first 3 or 4 months of life, and then you have some vaccine side effects where the risks are more common than 1 in 400,000. I want to say though, on years when we have outbreaks that are worse, like in 2014 or 2010, one of those 2 years, we had 6 fatalities in California alone.
I think there were 9 in the 2014.
Was there 9 fatalities in California? Unfortunately high number, like the number we usually have in the whole country. We had all those.
Well, there were 14,000 cases in the state, I think.
Right.
14,000? I think, 9,000 of those were infants. I mean, infants, children.
Children, right.
Pediatric cases.
Right.
But I found it was weird that 8 out of the 9 that did die were Hispanic. I thought that was a really interesting trend. I'd love to see more information on that, and maybe if there.
Well, we have a big Hispanic population in California.
Yeah, but I wonder if it's more if they're everybody has different genetic tendencies for different reasons. But yeah, and also, I mean, there are other things that factor in, maybe waiting longer to get to seek care or something like that factored in, like you're saying, assuming it, not going to the doctor, not having a doctor and not having somebody to go to, and so it made it worse.
Right. So I think the important thing is, I guess if you realize your kid has a really bad cough, I think everyone, vaccinated and unvaccinated alike, have a responsibility to not send your kid to school when the cough is really severe.
It goes for
Seek
any
medical
illness.
care.
Keep your kids at home.
Right.
Please stop bringing kids sick to school.
So I think the bottom line is you have to make these decisions. The vaccine, consider vaccine risk, consider disease risk.
Get comfortable with the disease, like you're saying. Get comfortable with what
understand
it looks like.
the disease. Get knowledgeable about the disease, so you know what to do if it comes your way. And again, this is not an example of where someone can say, "Oh no, if too many people stop vaccinating, the disease is going to come back." The disease is here, completely regardless of the vaccine.
With people vaccinating, even at super high rates.
And vaccinated.
Yeah, at over 95% in most places, it's still coming in outbreaks, like you said, in cyclical form.
Right. And I'll play the commercial because we this is a kind of a nice, I think, a very straightforward, neutral discussion about disease risk versus vaccine risk. We've had some very passionate discussions about media and how the media will try to convince you that you have to get this vaccine and you are a very bad person if you don't get this vaccine. I want to play what the media is telling you about whooping cough, and you can actually, if you YouTube Big Bad Wolf whooping cough commercial, you'll see
it's titled Big Bad Cough. That's
Big
why.
Bad,
Yeah, that's the actual thing. It's called
so
Big Bad Cough.
There's something out there. It's a highly contagious disease. It can be especially serious, even fatal to infants. Unfortunately, many people who spread it may not know they have it. It's called whooping cough, and the CDC recommends everyone, including those around babies, make sure their whooping cough vaccination is up to date. Understand the danger your new grandchild faces. Talk to your doctor or pharmacist about you and your family getting a whooping cough vaccination today.
And what's critical to understand is that the visual on that is mom and dad are driving their baby to grandma's house. Grandma has this little cough, and every time she coughs, her head turns into the big bad wolf. Mom and dad hand the baby over to grandma, and grandma's looking at baby, and grandma's like wolf head is like inches away from the baby's face. Mm-hmm. And what I find interesting is the commercial doesn't lie. The commercial is 100% accurate in what they're saying because they never actually say if grandma gets the vaccine, it's going to prevent her from catching whooping cough and spreading to the baby.
Yeah, they don't tell you that vaccine is going to keep that from happening. They just tell you get the vaccine.
Right. They give the impression that it's going to stop grandma from infecting the baby, but they never actually say that. But that's what we're up against. That's kind of the media misinformation.
So let's say grandma did get the vaccine, she still would be coughing like the wolf when she's looking at the baby because she would still be, in reality, she would still be passing that to the baby just exactly the same way as if she didn't get vaccinated.
Right. So no wonder we have these vaccine conversations is because it's important for everybody to know everything in all angles and aspects of these issues. So that's whooping cough. I feel like we've kind of covered everything.
And when we get into some vaccine safety stuff and talk about that, we'll go into more detail about, the CDC reported reactions and the numbers on that as it relates to each vaccine. Like Dr. Bob mentioned, this is definitely one that sees a lot of adverse events, and that's something that has to be discussed. It's not to deter somebody from getting it, but it has to be part of the conversation. As we can't lie, people can't keep lying to people as if it's always safe. There's never going to be a problem because that's just not what happens. So you could still choose to get it, but you at least get to know that there are, side effects. There are reactions that happen to many kids, and then you decide what you want to decide, but at least you have all the information. Let's at least be honest. Be clear with the information. That's the thing I think is missing.
Yeah, tell the truth. I like that from the movie Concussion, Will Smith, trying to prove football players were suffering concussions. All he wanted was all the scientists to simply tell the truth.
Yeah, I think
that's what we need.
That's the obligation of the community.
Of science.
We're all trusting. Right. We're all trusting. We expect this information to be out there. If you know it, then bring it out there, and then we make whatever decisions we make.
Well, thanks for listening, you guys. Again, you check us out on immunityeducationgroup.org. You can follow our Immunity Education Group Facebook page. Post comments on this episode. We'll get to those, and we'll answer them in future episodes. And
we are going to also cover ways to keep the immune system strong, how to build immunity in your child, just across the board, and adults in yourselves. Not just as it relates to each vaccine, but just in general. We want to make everybody. The goal is to make everybody as healthy as possible. That way, when you are confronted with infectious diseases, whether you vaccinate or not, and you're still affected with them, you want to make sure that you're familiar with them, you know how to handle them, how to treat them, and that your immune system is strong enough going into it that you're going to minimize your chance of complication or fatality. Because healthy people, we realize healthy children are not dying from the infectious diseases on the childhood, on average, are not dying from these diseases. We need to become familiar with them and find ways to keep our immune system strong. And that's something we want to also focus on with this podcast. I'm reading a great book about that I was telling you, Dr. Thomas Cohen, and about immunity and the importance of disease and building the immune system. And so we'll do an entire podcast, I think, on that, because that's a great book, a great read for everyone. And again, to be healthy, we focus on health first, not just covering it up with something and assuming that makes us healthy. So there's another part to this, is that you need to also keep your immune system strong for yourself and for your children.
Yeah, and I think we should probably do this with do the same kind of episode about measles, since I think that's the second disease that
we will do it with
about.
All of them, but
we'll do
you're saying for the next one.
Yeah, maybe we'll hit measles, because whooping cough and measles are the two things that really kind of go around in our society, and that the media pick up on as ways to spread the fear and misinformation.
Yeah, but it's crazy how many parents probably get their children vaccinated for all of the ones we're going to cover and have no idea which diseases they are, what they look like, what they are. So this is important for all parents to be checking in and kind of get familiar with the diseases on the schedule anyway.
Yeah, and I guess as a preview, don't send your child to school if he or she has a runny nose, red eyes, bad cough, and a rash that's spreading all over their body.
What could that be?
I know.
Tetanus?
I know.
Just kidding.
Yeah. Okay, you guys. Well, thanks for tuning in, and we will see you next time on the Vaccine Conversation.
Bye-bye.
We're gonna be the peace we wanna see in the world. Yeah, be the peace we wanna see in the world. Yeah, be the love we wanna see in the world. Be the joy.
The information in this podcast is for entertainment purposes only. It is not intended as medical advice. Always consult your healthcare professional for information on vaccines and infectious diseases.